Hello and welcome to tonight's panel discussion on the future of British theatre as part of the North Walls Alchemy Festival. A big thank you to Stage Text for working with us this evening. Please note that closed captioning is available for this discussion and you can access it via a button at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to talk to you just for a couple of minutes and then I'll pass over to our wonderful panel. So my name is Ria Parry and I am co-director at the North Wall Arts Centre in Oxford. And a big part of what we do is a programme called Arts Lab, which is our artist development programme for early career artists. And through that programme, we support those artists through space and residencies, workshops, mentorship, setting up collaborations, and very importantly, attempting to connect those artists to paid creative work. The Alchemy Festival is our annual New Work Festival, and it is our opportunity to showcase the work of our Arts Lab network and also our creative associates. It's normally a 3-day in-person event at the Arts Centre, but this year we've gone fully digital. We've embraced that format. And online right now, there is a wonderful programme of podcasts, audio plays, short films and shows. We've also kept one of our favourite festival elements this year, which is listening to brilliant people discuss topics which we feel are vital to the future of the theatre industry. So over the last couple of days, we've been looking at class and opportunity, theatre without borders towards an international theatre. And tonight, of course, we end with a great discussion on the future of British theatre. It's going to last around an hour, but just before I hand over to the panel, I would like to thank our partner at Oxford University. So John Livesey represents the Cameron Mackintosh Fund for Contemporary Drama, and we have very much enjoyed working with John to present the panel series this year. I'm going to hand over to to say a few.
I am the current drama officer at the University of Oxford. I oversee all drama activity on campus and work alongside local theatres like the North Wall on productions, projects and special events like tonight. In 1990, the University Cameron Mackintosh Drama Fund. We are very grateful for the continued support of the foundation, and I am thrilled to represent CMDF tonight. It's been such a pleasure to work with the North Wall on these events, and I am looking forward to listening to the conversation between our fantastic guests tonight.
Thanks, John. So without further ado, I will hand to our wonderful guests. Emma Rice, who will be facilitating the discussion, Justin Audibert, Tineke Craig, and Annalise Dodds. Thank you so much. Over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Ria. Thanks, John. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this discussion about the tiny subject, the future of British theatre. I hope we're going to sort it out in the next hour.
I'm sure we will. Easy.
I thought the first thing we should do is introduce ourselves. Just a little introduction and a snapshot of what lockdown's been like for all of you. I'll kick off. My name's Emma Rice. I'm the Artistic Director of Wise Children, formerly the Artistic Director of Shakespeare's Globe, and before that, the Artistic Director of Knee High. And my lockdown has been really turning from a sort of Luddite skeptic into a sort of newborn evangelical convert to the possibilities of digital. So that's been the highlight of my lockdown. Tineke, how about you?
Hi everyone, my name's Tineke Craig and I'm a freelance theatre director knocking around directing plays and musicals wherever they'll have me. And my lockdown was, I don't know, I was in a position, I was in a privileged enough position to be able to get grants and stay at home, and I am of a disposition that is really well suited to lockdowns because of my amazing ability to take up random hobbies. So I've basically just turned my house into a sort of craft station, and I also am now really good at roller skating. So,
respect. Annalise, tell us about your lockdown and yourself.
Thank you very much indeed, Emma. I have to say I'm not as creative as Tineke in any way, nor I'm sure as able on roller. Well, I know I'm not as able in roller skating, but my name's Annalise Dodds. I'm the Shadow Chancellor. I'm also MP for Oxford East. And my lockdown has been A peculiar experience. I would say people have seen a lot more of the inside of my house on television than I ever thought would have been the case. It's been really quite a strange experience. It's obviously been a really sad one, because I've known many people who've been touched very deeply by what's taken place, both in health terms and economic terms as well. But really looking forward to this discussion, and thank you for having me as the probably the non-creative person really on this panel, but it's lovely to be with you all.
It's great to have you. Justin, tell us about your time.
Thanks. Yeah, and Annalise, everybody is creative.
I was going to say that too. Everyone's creative.
Everybody's creative. So you are creative. Yeah. I'm going to start with the lockdown first. So I can't top Tinu with the roller skating and the crafts, but I have taken up Pilates, and I would never have done that in my life, I don't think. And it's been a real thing for me. Like, and I've kept it up. And so I'm like, please, thing that I would never have done that in a million years, and I would, so I think that's good. And I have a little 3-year-old who you might see, she might Zoom crash this at various points because my partner's running a bit late back, which would be great. And I've got to spend extra time with her, which is like, again, an absolute blessing. And I run the Unicorn Theatre, which is kind of like the largest theatre that specialises in work for children and young people. And a little bit like Emma, I would say, I started out quite sceptical of all things digital, but I've had a kind of journey over the year and feel a little bit more, I'm maybe not quite as evangelical, but I can definitely see the place a little bit more of it in the scheme of things, and there are exciting possibilities. So I've also liked that. But like everybody, as well, have, known people that lost people, and, obviously our industry has been, I think sometimes maybe people thought theatre people whinged about stuff when it wasn't impacting them that much, but in an interesting way, like on this one, we've been really, really affected. And my mum is an ICU nurse as well, so I've heard a bit from that angle as well at St. Thomas's. So I've heard a little bit from that angle as well, so yeah.
Wow, you've been in the thick of it from all angles.
Yeah, some good, some bad, like one of those where you're like,
Well, let's kick off with the question itself. I've got the privilege of having 2 brilliant stepkids who I have watched over the years, gaming and being online and being able to have experiences which they can affect, and whenever they fancy doing it. And I want to ask the question, is there a future for theatre, given that it feels like quite an old-fashioned experience to buy a ticket, go and sit in the seat that has been prescribed for you and see a show which is going to be much the same on the night you watch it and the night afterwards? Is there a future for British theatre? I'm going to start with you, Tineke.
Oh no. Yeah, the short answer is yes. But I think, like all things, there's only future. Nothing has a future unless it's willing to adapt or change or understand who it's for. I think sometimes that's often a problem with theatre or with any art form, if it sort of forgets who it's for and why it exists and becomes a kind of circle jerk of its own existence, then that becomes less interesting, less relevant, and there's not much future in that. But on the assumption that theatre will grow and change with the world as it should, then yeah, of course there'll be a future for it, I think.
Justin, you run, as you say, you run the Unicorn, which is literally on the planet to create work for the next generation. So tell us what you think.
Yeah, so I would go with the short answer as well of yes. I'm particularly pleased that Tinu used the term circle jerk. I wasn't expecting to hear that tonight, so 10 points for you, Tinu. I suppose what I would say is I cannot envisage a medium more apt to people getting together and sitting together and being together, and how much people are really desperate to do that. But to take on board the changes of the last year, I mean, Tineke is exactly right that it's made us all ask questions about who we make theatre for. As the world has done, it's made us all ask questions about what we think society should be, isn't it? I suppose the excitement about being outdoors and making work for the outdoors is a thing that I guess, again, in the same way as digital work, I guess in some ways that has not been my world. And like starting to embrace that a little bit more has been kind of interesting, and I think that's really good. And what you said, Emma, is absolutely, it is so interesting. And I'm starting to get people come to me now and talk to me about, AR and VR and what it means and how it could be in theatre. And obviously the bit of me that's a Luddites like terrified of even the idea of it, but I can see that that is really exciting as we reimagine like the ways that we can interact with the medium. That is really fascinating. Yeah.
I've been very inspired by, I'm too old to be a gamer myself, but I've been really inspired by watching something that I dismissed really, but how interactive and engaging gaming is. And I've spent a little bit of time thinking about how I can change my theatre practices. And just as an aside, Justin, I feel a little bit depressed about working outdoors because I spent my 20s and 30s working outdoors in Cornwall, and I promised myself that I was never going to be wet again. And it looks like we're all going to go outside again. I feel like I've done my time, but
yeah, we've got one of our shows going to Regent's Park, and we've never done a show at the open air at Regent's Park. And I was there the other day for a site visit, and it had rained all morning, and I was dreading going on the site visit. And as I got there, literally like the sun came out and it was perfect. And I was like, this is what it's going to be like, right? It's just this, yeah, every day. And they were, all the staff there were like, you're crazy.
That's the trouble with working outdoors. When it's good, it's perfect. And when it's bad, oh my goodness, it's the worst.
Yeah.
Annalisa, tell me about your thoughts about the future of British theatre.
Yeah, I mean, I should just say, talking about the outdoors, I'm sorry that you may be able to hear the strains of an ice cream van piping very loudly through the window. So sorry about that. But I mean, I really agree with what's been said, albeit from the point of view of someone who obviously knows a lot less about the nuts and bolts. But I mean, I've been to one excellent outdoor event actually last summer when that was possible, which was actually kind of on the banks of the Isis, as we call it in Oxford, obviously a bit of the Thames. And I thought it was amazing just to see what I knew already, which is that theatre is such a flexible form in any case. I mean, it really is a kind of medium that in many ways, I mean, obviously depending on what's being represented, that does lend itself to that flexibility, to being used in a whole variety of different ways. I do think though at the same time that certainly those of us who really enjoy watching theatre, that we really are desperate for that kind of experience that Justin was talking about, and being in those smaller venues. I had some interesting, really inspiring actually discussions with people involved with the Edinburgh Festival last summer in Scotland, obviously the biggest arts festival in the world, where they've adapted, I think, incredibly, again, that flexibility to really do what they can to try and make sure that the festival can come back strongly eventually, not immediately, but when that's possible. And just thinking about the range that you can get there of, being sat literally with two other people watching, potentially a great production, potentially not a great production. We all know what it's like at the festival, a whole range of things, but sometimes absolutely terrific work. Or, you can go from that to, what we've seen in the Playhouse here in Oxford and everything in between. So yeah, I think it is a medium that most definitely has a future, no question about it. I would also say, from my point of view, I suppose, particularly as Shadow Chancellor, it must have a future, because it was an area where traditionally it was growing a lot of the time, really, really important employer, really key core element of our economy, although often we wouldn't want to look at it just through that lens. Obviously, we'd want to conceive of it culturally from a well-being point of view as well, but it is very, very core for our economy also, along with all the other creative industries. So it needs to have a future from my point of view.
I thank you for that, because we're a good business and we feed all sorts of other big industries. We do provide employment and all sorts of opportunities, and it's often forgotten because people, well, I don't know about you two, but people have said to me all my life, oh, but you love your job. And I do love my job, but it is also a job, and it takes skill and time and intellect and and graft.
There's, I think, an odd thing that we sometimes encounter in this country, maybe other places, where it's sort of not a real job unless you hate it, So there's a sort of like there's a sort of like weird disdain. If you enjoy your job, then it's not proper work, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I'm agreeing. Oh, where did Justin go? Oh,
he'll be back, I'm sure. We've already touched on it, but let's talk a little bit about the digital opportunities that have sort of raced into the lead. I mean, that's of the things that this last year, 18 months have brought, is that it's brought change in many areas much faster than I think would have naturally happened. And I think moving stuff online has been one of the big leaps that the industry's taken. And, certainly personally, we're storytellers. And I think it was what Justin was talking about earlier. what we're here to do. And I think it's been really amazing to see how people have found new platforms and new voices and new ways to tell stories. Tineke, tell me about what your thoughts and feelings are about this new platform.
Oh, I have so many thoughts and feelings. I think it's the thing that I'm most excited about, maybe even more than the form and the medium itself, is how many more people might be able to access the work. That's the thing that I think, that's the thing that converted me, first of all, was that notion of, I was very lucky over the course of last year. I managed to was able and allowed to make 2 pieces of work that both were digital in different ways. One was live streamed from a theatre, and one was a slightly more hybrid experience, sort of, we made a kind of film out of our show. But in both instances, it was suddenly incredible to think, oh, well, normally it would be people who have the ability to get to the theatre, and also a certain amount more money that is required in order to get to the theatre, as well as just, like, you know, your ability to travel. And suddenly we were getting people from all over the world watching our work, and being able to reach huge audiences feels like, it's really hard to argue with that one, you know, like, however you feel about what you think theatre is. And there are all sorts of, like, different kind of, I suppose, layers and ways to think about it. Like, what's the thing that makes it theatre? Is it that we're all gathered together? Well, we're all experiencing something at the same time. Does that count? You start to have all these different versions of it. Or, like, is it about the fact that what you're watching was done live or in one take, so to speak? Is that enough? Does that give you the kind of the risk element that comes with that relationship between an audience member and a performer? Or is it about the fact that you are watching something as it happens, even if you're, do you know what I mean? There are all these different versions of, like, what we consider to be the live experience or the theatre experience. And it sort of allowed us, or allowed me anyway, I'm sure it's allowed people to think all sorts of things, but it's made me question kind of, what's the criteria? When does it get to be theatre, and who says what that is? But for me, it's been really exciting. And the idea that, I don't know, the idea that my granny watched a show I did in Jamaica, and the fact that could happen was just like, well, that, you can't argue with that one, can you? So, yeah.
No, I mean, I had exactly the same thing. Like, when we did Anansi, like digitally, like in 85 different countries. I had had emails from Suriname. I was like, what? I didn't even have to look. I did have to look Suriname up. I felt really ignorant. I was like, where exactly is Suriname? Yeah, you know, that element, and exactly all the things you said, Tina, you know, all of barriers that we don't even think of as barriers, you know, in terms of, let alone economic ones, which we think of, I think, quite a lot, but I don't spend a lot of time thinking about transport and all of those things, which are huge, enormous barriers for enormous numbers of people. And then people could, could connect with the culture in that kind of a way. And the other thing that for us was a new experience, which I think is slightly different because we're a theatre that specialises in work with young people, was teachers coming to us and saying, having the work digitally, we can watch it at the start of the day, then we can come back to it later on. And obviously, you know, that's not a thing that we can do in a 90-minute live show. But it was really interesting. They were like, we actually could do loads of creative teaching around it because it was a digital resource. You know, now you do get into the question of, can you do that and still keep it as theatre, and what is theatre? All those things that Tina was as well. But that was a really interesting moment for us. Like, we were like, oh, okay, the teachers really responded to that.
I think, I mean, I just agree with you, is that the access is the thing that I think swiped us all from the side, that suddenly realizing who we could reach was absolutely thrilling. But I think I was surprised artistically, because we've done 2 live broadcasts, how exciting it was. And actually it almost reminded me of the live event, because as a director, when you're watching a run, your work's almost done. You're sat in the dark with a notebook. Whereas with live broadcast, you're on cans, you're talking to your team, you're missing shots. I mean, with the adrenaline, I haven't felt adrenaline like that in 10 years. So ironically, what I thought was going to be a much drier experience was really, really thrilling. And the other thing that we did at Wise Children is we moved our school, the School for Wise Children, online. And again, I thought that the teaching experience without the chance to touch and laugh and play would be diminished. And whilst we did lose some things, I felt the depth that we could go with students, the personal, the way that the depth of interaction over Zoom really surprised me. And I think I definitely have improved as a teacher, because I didn't distract myself with a ball or a game or a group, is that I just really took some time to be with people. And again, these were just surprises that I think, well, I'll take into my process. Nothing will take away from the live event and having an audience, but I think this would definitely have enriched it. Annalise, have you, as an audience, have you seen any digital events, and what's it been like for you on the other side?
Yes, that's a really interesting question. So I, in fact, related to what you were just talking about, Emma. So I've had experience of Pegasus Theatre in Oxford, and they do brilliant work with young people, and in fact with my own children, and the way that they created something from their performances. So they still created a kind of performance on the basis of, you know, Zoom interaction, which was very different, but actually which was incredible, and, you know, a totally different kind of product, if that doesn't sound like quite the right word, but, you know, experience really for people to watch. You know, it's really, really interesting. And I think, again, they were very creative in doing that. You know, I mean, to me, the technical wizardry must have been pretty substantial. And I suppose that's where I guess there must be a lot of extra effort and stress and work that's required, which you know, goes on in the background in order to produce something that then looks effortless. And I suppose one of the challenges, and having seen some different bits and pieces of performed work that's been streamed digitally, mainly from kind of Oxford-based organisations, I suppose one worry that I do have a little bit is I think there's often an expectation from the audience that kind of thing should be, you know, kind of either pay what you want or free or that kind of thing. So actually kind of using it in a way that is going to be then supporting the performers, to me, seems to be a bit of a challenge from some of those that I've talked to who've been engaged. I suppose just finally, you know, I was just thinking when you were talking about one of the last pieces of, actually it was dance theatre that I saw in the old fire station just before the lockdown came in. Just when sadly the pandemic was starting, and the kind of interaction that you can have with performers where you're making eye contact, where you're very close to them. I mean, that just simply cannot be ever a part of the online experience, I think. I mean, there's different ways of interacting, of course, but I think we're all looking forward to getting back to some of that kind of experience as well when we can.
Here. Is what
preaching to the choir there, Annalise. I'd say preaching to the choir. Very good.
I feel very excited to have you with us, Annalise, because you actually have some power as an MP. So if it's all right with everybody, can we talk a little bit about funding of the arts, even though it's sort of, it's a difficult issue, but it's right at the heart of what we do and why we do it. And the one thing that I wanted to talk about, because it's happening right now, is the news that there's a proposed 50% cut to arts subjects at a higher level, those that are not among the strategic priorities of the government, which are the arts. I want to talk about it, but for me, it makes me want to scream and burn the house down, because it's really the pipeline, what we're trying to do, and to make this industry represent the people of the country and diversify and offer opportunities and different voices by cutting down the pipeline and stopping those possibilities. I mean, and to call us not a strategic priority when we've already talked about the great industry that is the entertainment industry. But can I kick off with you and what your feeling is as an MP?
Yeah, sure. I mean, actually, just to kind of emphasize what you said at the end, if you look at what's taken place with the creative industries over the last, I think it's, since the last recession, so over the last 10 years, essentially, they've actually grown at 3 times the pace of the rest of the economy. And in some parts of the creative industries, even faster than that. So motion picture, video and TV program production, to give it its formal category, has grown 6 times as fast, actually, and very obviously is a real strength for our country, as well as many other aspects of the performing arts and creative industries more generally. But I suppose I wouldn't look at it just in those terms, because as we know, having some aspects of creative teaching for children, and then indeed in our universities, we know is very important for many other subjects as well. You know, it's not the case that people who have a very narrow curriculum necessarily are going to succeed in that narrow curriculum. Very often they need to have that wider exposure to in order to develop themselves. So, you know, I am concerned about this. Like you, Emma, I think the language is peculiar that's been used. You know, the Office for Students saying the government does not consider art subjects to be as strategically important as other high cost disciplines, which are receiving a 12% increase in funding, I think is peculiar. And I don't think that that reflects really our strengths as a country. So it's going in the wrong direction.
And can you talk about Labour's policy?
Yeah, so we've obviously said that we don't think that is going in the right direction. We said more broadly that we want to see a broader curriculum. I mean, we want to see, you know, a strong focus on standards right across the whole curriculum, and obviously particularly making sure that we're dealing with those educational inequalities. But we would view that as critical when it comes to the creative industries as well, and creative arts as well, because progressively, and you know, you'll know this in spades, we've seen, for example, music provision, theatre and drama provision increasingly becoming something very often, sadly, that is a preserve of those who can afford to take part in it, where it's not generalised across schools. We do think that's problematic, and you know, obviously we'll set our very formal plans for the next general election nearer the time, but certainly in terms of our action as an opposition, we have been trying to raise this at every opportunity.
I mean, let's be really blunt. It's, the proposal is disgrace and crazy, and I mean, I just don't like. It's like, what do you? I don't. Yeah, I mean, aside from the economics, which, yeah, as you say, the economics don't make sense. If you are, even if you're very, very capitalistic, you would want the sectors that you're doing well in to continue to do well in, right? I mean, I'm not an economist, but that seems logical. And you know, but the wider question is, surely this year has shown us, what do we want to be as a society? You know, that's the question we need to ask, right? The fundamental basic question that we need to ask. And in that society, yeah, you 100% need engineers and physicists and mathematicians and doctors, and you 100% need people who are artists and historians and geographers, and like, you need all of those things, because like, that's what's going to make a more fulfilled, well-rounded society. And so, I mean, yeah, it's ludicrous, you know, and that's outside of my own narrow industry, you know, which I passionately believe in, obviously. But if you think about what it means on a wider level, and you know, as you've all remarked, when you think, you know, the places that can afford to pay, they could hire somebody like me, you know, there are public schools, private schools that can afford to pay a theatre director a salary to come into their children, the children there who pay fees can actually have access to like first-rate drama. You know, I know people who, you know, my peers and contemporaries who have taken that as a job because they've got a steady job doing that thing, you know, and I go, yeah, it's just craziness.
It's amazing when you look at the when you look at sort of like prospectuses for sort of the elite schools and the way that they talk about the arts. It's amazing it's quite shocking, because you read Eton's drama manifesto and you go, oh, so you do know then. Like, you do know it's really, really important, because, you know, they talk about it's not just important for our boys who might want to go into becoming actors or directors or writers, but rather it's important for our future politicians and our future doctors and our future lawyers, because it teaches you all the other skills. So they do know. And that's the part that feels so insidious, doesn't it? Because then you just think, you know, it makes your brain break a little bit why you don't think that should be accessible to everybody. It's also just, I think it's important to remember as well, and we all kind of touched on it, that like, it's not like if you do drama GCSE, you'll become an actor any more than if you do chemistry GCSE, you'll become a chemist, right? And yet we seem to value that subject immensely. We understand why that's valuable, even if we don't produce a nation of chemists. It's about understanding what else that subject provides. And I mean, drama, I guess that's our speciality here, so that's what we'll talk about. But like, we know just by having taken part in it, this is about working on your empathy, this is about working on your public speaking, this is about working on your confidence, it's about working on your literacy, it's about working on creativity, it's about working on perspective.
Collaborative.
A million things. You're working with other people, you're working on your own. It's a million skills that we're denying people. It's not just take the arts out of it. Like, it's providing a ton of skills that for some reason seem to be proposed to be not important for a huge swathe of the population. And I find that to be, yeah, I mean, it just makes my brain glitch. I don't get it.
And you then think
deeply angry in a way that I can't be very articulate about.
You think around the world, one of the things that we are prized for, you know, is the history, is the contribution to culture that we've made. And I would say, really, particularly in the post-war period, like really, like I think since 1945, like the contribution of culture, you know, it's kind of the soft power that embodies, and the kind of desirability of coming to visit this country that engenders. You know, the attitude that gives people towards the United Kingdom. Yeah, I mean, it does. You know, that's one of the key draws to this country. You know, and the values that should underpin this country.
Absolutely. I mean, it's angering and sinister that they are deciding what their strategic priorities are. As you're saying, you know, education is such a wide thing, isn't it? And to start picking out what's important. And I agree with you, Justin, is that the arts feed so many other industries. I'm so passionate about funding. You know, I'm of the lucky generation that didn't have to pay for my education, and was unemployed for a couple of years while I found my feet and took, you know, unemployment benefit. I've paid it back 100 times over, willingly and happily, in my taxes. But, you know, I just sort of think we've got to stop saving money at where it starts. We've got to invest and trust that this will pay back over and over again. And as I say, the fact that we will be losing the less privileged people on the way, which is the first thing that happens. It's the first thing, as you say, the private schools have got it sussed.
Yeah, they know it works. It's also just really interesting, I think, to think about. You know, if we lose the least privileged people, which we will immediately if it comes to pass. You also lose. It doesn't just look good, diversity. It is good. You know, like it's not just that it kind of like looks nice and makes everybody feel good because there's people who look different all on a poster. Like it's better that way. The work is better. And if the work gets worse, the industry will make less money. It doesn't even make sense on a callous and cold financial route to do that, because the work will get worse.
And, you know, and you know, in fairness, you don't have to ask softy liberals like us. Ask Andrew Lloyd Webber. He'd tell you that. Like,
this is it. You know,
you know, like that's what's interesting. He knows that. Like he's like, yeah, we need to be more diverse.
This is it. Like, you know, right, even on the thickest end of that wedge, we know what works, and it feels insane to deny it. Like it doesn't make sense. It's you know, it's silly. That's my hot take.
Yeah.
It's silly. I agree.
Tinica Craig proclaimed silly.
This brings me on to something that I think is of sort of vital importance. Is a lot of things have shifted culturally over the last 18 months, and the two big movements that have rocked the world have been the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter movement. And certainly speaking personally, that I've had to look at myself, at the world around me in such a new way, readdress my memories and what I thought about things that have happened to me in my past. And again, one of the, I believe will become an upside is that there's been space to do it. You know, our industry stopped, and that never happens. It never happens. And in that stop, there was also space to, I think, possibly piece together a better future. So I want to talk about that. Who wants to kick off rather than me choosing? Who wants to kick off?
I really want to talk, but come on, Tinica, you start with this.
No, you start. You want to talk. I'm still forming an idea.
I think and systems in place that will stop that. Like whether that works, and you know, I understand that it's a complicated set of factors, because you know what, I run a theatre of 27 full-time staff and then like 70 casual staff, and we couldn't. Well, I say this, and maybe you should hold me to account. So you could. I don't think we can have a HR department in a team that big, you know, and that's the thing. A lot of organizations, the HR department would deal with a lot of, I suppose I'm talking more about harassment here, but so what are the mechanisms that we can do to make our industry anti-racist, you know, feminist and so on and so forth? But I would say that the year has given organizations and institutions the time which they never would have to think about it. I mean, I'm honestly, I'm not joking with you. I have literally come from unconscious bias training this afternoon. And, you know, I kind of go, I do think that this time has made people go, we all knew that there was unjust working practices, and we all knew that the people who bear the brunt of that intersectionally are people from the global majority and women. You know, we all knew this, but the year has shown in stark contrast that A, that you can't go back to that, and B, you know, we have to do something about it, and the power is in us to change it. Yeah, sorry, I ranted then, blimey.
No, it's good. It's good. It's true. I think it's really complicated, as you say, Justin. I'm thinking specifically about Me Too and sort of gender-based discrimination first. Let's start there. Why not? It feels so difficult, doesn't it, when we have, like, I think there are two things that work against us as an industry that we need to work on, maybe three, but well, several, but two that I'm going to talk about now. One is what you said, Justin, of like, we don't have we have like, there's no kind of head of theatre, right? Like there's no sort of freelance head that you can go to. So you're on this slightly a world that feels slightly more unregulated anyway. And also we're in an industry where there's an understanding that your reputation precedes you, that you're only as good as your last job, and that you need to stay on people's good side in order to keep working, in order to sort of stay alive in the industry at all.
It's a really good point, Ginny.
You know what I mean? Which makes it so hard to speak up, because it's so easy to get labelled difficult. And I think it's easier to get labelled difficult if you're a woman. I think it's even easier to get labelled difficult if you're a Black woman. These things stack up, don't they? And so I think those are the two things that I have no real solution to this, but I think those are our two sort of big areas of like, this is why it feels like it happens more in our industry than some other industries. In defense of our industry, I would also say that our industry, when the shit hits the fan in our industry, it gets reported on, and Bob in the office doesn't get reported on. So that's also something to bear in mind in terms of why it feels so much like our industry is covered in pervs, because actually the world is covered in pervs, but ours is quite flashy and it's quite good to write about. It's probably something to say in defense of the arts, but we do have these two major problems, don't we? We're not regulated in the same way, and everybody has a vested interest in staying on everybody's good side all the time, which makes it really, really hard to speak out. And I think acknowledging that is the first step to being like, right, here are obvious pitfalls, and how can we make sure we avoid falling into that hole? Now,
I would say,
how indeed.
I 100% agree with that, and the fact that we have such a large freelance workforce who have borne the brunt of this pandemic more as well, like, and we should just say that 100% is huge. And I would also say it's a real argument for like why you need unions, you know, and that's also that then the unions have to have these processes really rigorous and thorough, and I don't think that's entirely true of the way the unions work in the same as industry. But you know, those things act to check on power. I would say the one thing, I can only talk personally, but I can talk a little bit about what other theatre directors that I know are doing, which is also showing the mechanics of actually how the business and the whole organization operates from top to bottom to the freelance community. Like, and I've been undertaking that, and like regularly updating them every month and saying, look, and explaining how decisions are made. Because also the other thing is the way that decisions are made and how resources are spent and allocated has always been opaque. And that is partly because it's someone's taste, and there is going to be an opacity to that. But you can at least explain the bits that you can explain, and not explain the bits that you're like, well, that was my opinion. You know, so I feel like we've started that conversation. We've got a long way to go.
Yeah, I suppose one of the like really important things, I feel this quite strongly when I think about Black Lives Matter. I think about last June, but I suppose it's true of all these things, and is that the thing I'm most anxious about is a sort of lack of momentum, that everybody every white person I know joined an anti-racist book club, and I would love to know if they're still going to their anti-racist book club now, and I really hope they are, but part of me doesn't want to ask because I kind of know they're not. I think that there is what I'm nervous about, and what I really hope we can keep going is like this work is decades long work, and we only get anywhere if we got to keep our foot on the gas with that, because it's really easy to forget. And
I've been in a lot of panels about diversity in the arts I'm 40, and in the 10 11 12 years I've been on a lot of those panels.
This is it. I feel like as soon as
the
I've
only
had any
non-white person.
Yeah, I've spoken on enough diversity panels now to know that everyone knows it's an issue, and what I now want is for people to do something about it.
I would say that my most hopeful moment of the last year though was going down to the American Embassy and to on the BLM protest. Like, and I the thing that blew my mind, and I work with young people all the time, but the directness and the righteousness of the young people, and they got it, black, white, brown, everybody in between, like that. I was like, wow. There's a kind of British form of protest which involves lots of whimsy. Don't get me wrong, I like a bit of whimsy and jokes about tea as well, but there was an amazing directness to the protest that was like, no more bullshit, we've had enough, I want to be an ally, I'll keep my mouth shut, I'll stand by you, I promise. Like that, I just found like amazingly inspiring, and I've been on a lot of protests and demos and so on and so forth, and I've never felt that feeling, like where the directness of it was amazing, and so young people were so strong in their convictions that I was like, wow.
It felt like a state of emergency, didn't it? I think that's what I found really exciting and like hopeful about it, was decided that people were like, this is literally a matter of life and death, like, on the thickest end of that wedge. So I'm hopeful, and the arts generally is a fairly progressive world in terms of how people would at least define their own politics. So we can hope people would want to be on the right side of that. And I do hope, and I think people are on the right side of that, but I think for me, I'm really tentatively hopeful, but I think in all these situations, you can't let it slip, because once it slips, you got to start again, I think. I think in terms of our practices in the room, it's been really interesting in terms of and thinking about Me Too, and there's been sort of cases recently in the press that we've all been sort of reading and paying attention to it. I think at the very least it will mean that everybody is a little bit more mindful of the way that they move through a space, and maybe a little bit more mindful about what power they have, and also people who might not immediately consider themselves to have power suddenly reckoning with what that is, and who you have power in relation to who's in the room with you. I'm hoping that maybe we've all had a little bit of time to reckon with, like, where do I fit in this? When am I wielding what, and how can I make sure I'm on the ethical side of that? I hope.
Yeah, I do think as well there is and I think it's a thing in our industry, but there also has to be room for people who have got things wrong to be able to, there's obviously a line where you've got things wrong, there's no, justice needs to be meted out. But there also, like in any situation, there needs to be room for people to grow and learn, and to be able to feel that they can say, I'm sorry, I'm not talking, obviously, if you've done harassed anyone or anything, I mean like microaggressions and that kind of stuff is what I'm talking about. That then, and I hope that we start to work out what that space is, and that we can learn when we do these things unintentionally, but still harmful, that we can work out ways that we can make amends and not repeat that behavior. And I think a lot of the time behavior is repeated because nobody can, because people are freelance, people are pluralists, call it out,
Yeah.
I feel, thanks you two, by the way, and for all the positivity as well. I mean, I feel, it's been a tough year on lots of levels, but I feel incredibly hopeful. I feel that there is no way back. I think it's going to be demanded of our industry that we show change, and certainly speaking for myself, we've had the chance to look at I've got a tiny company, but we've looked at every area of it, not just the front-facing side of things, which it's easier in many ways to get right, but to look at the office, to look at the board, to look backstage, to look at the crew, and to really, put in a lot of time and effort. So I feel I'm going to do that as well. I'm feeling really hopeful and I think that is demanded of me, because I do have power. I don't know when it happened. I never felt it, but there's a day when you wake up and you go, oh God, it's me. You know, I'm now the keeper. And
you're the man, Emma Rice, and we've all known it for ages. We've all been calling you that behind your back.
Oh, don't! What a thought! What a thought! But you know, it's how you use your power, isn't it? And you need to use it for good. And you know, I think both of you mentioned power. You know, and I've certainly been looking back over my experience as a young actor and sort of replaying that through different eyes. But also, you know, it took me a long time to become a feminist. In reality, I was so busy fighting in a man's world that it took me quite a long time to remember to bring the women with me, you know. So I thank you for you saying that there needs to be some tolerance and kindness, and to give people oxygen to change in, because none of us are born perfect.
Yeah.
Annalisa, any thoughts? You've been in the thick of it again, haven't you? It's so exciting having somebody that's in a different, looking at it from a different lens.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting how many parallels there were in the discussion that we just had and the political world, in inverted commas. I mean, the idea that people end up in positions of power because there's something unique about them, you know, that they're uniquely charismatic or something, when actually, of course, they, you know, they'll have some talent of some form, but where very often they've been in the right place at the right time with people supporting them, and, you know, others haven't been, and it's been much more to do with kind of structural processes rather than something innate, which can then lead to, unfortunately, you know, people not being accountable for behaviours that are not just not supporting others, but are discriminating against others. I mean, I think really critical for this into the future will be making sure that there isn't that opacity, that these structures are transparent, and outcomes and outputs as well. I mean, you know, it's maybe a kind of spotty point, but I do think that reporting is very important here, you know, around wages. You know, we've said that there should be ethnicity pay gap reporting, that should be a standard, as well as gender pay gap reporting. Because currently you've got a situation where, I mean, it's interesting relating to the discussion about being open, you know, quite often those organisations that have been more open around some of these issues, quite rightly, they lay themselves open because they want to change and improve. They're criticised, you know, rightly, because, you know, because there are inequalities, but those who aren't actually open in the first place don't feel any of that heat at all. So we do need to have a lot more transparency, I think, around all of this, and really try and make sure that it's not something focused around the immediacy of the Black Lives Matter movement and Me Too, that it really is captured into the future. And you know, I was just reflecting on, you know, whether this is a kind of permanent change. The situation in the US, where you know, obviously you had in many quarters a much more kind of enlightened kind of media and entertainment business compared to the government side for quite a long time, and a lot of kind of clashes there. I mean, I suppose it's interesting, particularly given the Soul review that we had recently, which I, you know, fundamentally disagreed with, suggesting that there's not institutionalized racism. I mean, this is how can that be claimed, particularly after the awful year that we've had?
Well, even in the report, they said that people from the global majority had 2.3%, like, and 2.3% less. So there's no equality, is there? Even if you took it on that one metric, which was the terrible metric anyway, even in the same metric, that was bananas.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so I think what we don't want to see is this being, you know, an issue for, you know, for potentially entertainment, the arts, etc. You know, some institutions, but then that being counteracted by, you know, a kind of narrative coming from government or elsewhere saying, actually, you know, none of these issues really matter. They fundamentally matter. And, you know, for the reasons that actually Justin was saying earlier, he's absolutely right, that, you know, fundamentally, this is not just about kind of whether individuals are treated badly, it's about whether our country develops the talent that's there or doesn't.
You should want equal pay for a conservative voting woman as much, you know, like, of course you should, like.
Yeah, and as you know, as Tanuki said, like, we know that diversity in general is associated with better performing organizations. That's been indicated time and time again empirically.
Yeah.
It's just taking a very long time for some people to be enlightened about that reality, unfortunately. But obviously there are vested interests there as well that we need to face up to.
Annalise, can I ask you an unfair question?
Of course, if the chair doesn't mind. Yeah.
I didn't. Yeah.
Of course.
So one of the books I read over lockdown, aside from doing my Pilates, was Who Owns England? Guy Shrubsall's amazing book, which I would really recommend people to read. I'm not going to ask a question. All I suppose I want to say is, well, yeah, is there, I think there are some things in that would challenging some of the things in that, and who owns the land, and what that means in this, still in what is supposedly a 21st century country. I wonder if Labour might think about looking at some of that, because it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think it's relevant to some of this discussion very directly, because if you look at what's taken place with many of those venues for different forms of performing arts over the years, I mean, particularly obviously an issue for nighttime venues, but many others as well. You then start to look into some of the ownership situations, on our high streets and elsewhere. Yeah. And it's quite fascinating. I mean, Private Eye produced it. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, but it's really interesting in relation to Oxford to know quite how much of Oxford is owned, for example, through tax havens, buildings that people will walk past every single day, have really quite interesting ownership structures behind them. And the direct impact of that very often is there's less of a desire to serve the community then with those buildings, or to have that community related consciousness that's important, for individuals and for local businesses as well, and obviously the creative industries too as part of that.
We're going to have to wrap this up, sweet friends. That's sort of slipped through our fingers so fast, hasn't it? I feel there's an amazing future, and actually the fact that we've not been allowed to be with our audiences and with our families and with our loved ones, and we've all gone through times of grief and times of reflection, means that we're going to come out of this reborn. Genuinely, I think we've got so much more to give, and and that there will be real change, because that's what the gift has been, is the space to contemplate change and to plan for change. And when I listen to amazing people like you talk, who are the future and the power, I feel nothing but hope and gratitude for this session. So thank you, John. Thank you, Ria. And thanks, Tineke, Justin and Annalise, for a brilliant chat.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you for your generosity over the last hour. It has been such a pleasure to listen to you all and to spend this evening with you. So thank you. Also, of course, a thank you to our virtual audience for sharing your time with us this evening. Please do check out the Alchemy Festival programme online at www.thenorthwall.com. Thank you once again to our fantastic guests. I could not have asked for a better, brilliant conversation to end the panel series on. So huge thank you, Emma, Tineke, Annalise and Justin. To everyone, have a lovely rest of your evening, and we shall see you again soon. Bye-bye.